The morning air was thick with tension as Nathan sat by the window, staring at the growing number of flyers that had started circulating across the internet. Each one bore Adaora's face, plastered everywhere, on social media, in street corners, and even in online classified ads. The bounty chief Ibuka had placed on her head was high, more than enough to turn anyone's loyalty. It made Nathan's heart race with anger, knowing she was being hunted like a prize. As he scrolled through his phone, the constant stream of messages and posts made his stomach churn. Adaora's face seemed to be everywhere he looked, her eyes wide with fear, her soft smile replaced by the desperation of being on the run. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, and it was Cheek. Nathan hesitated before answering, knowing what was coming. "Nathan, man, what the hell are you thinking?" Cheek's voice crackled with urgency. "I've been seeing those flyers all over the place. What are you planning to do?" Nathan took a deep breath, trying to steady the emotions that surged within him. "I'm going to keep her safe, Cheek, no matter what it takes." There was a long silence on the other end, followed by a frustrated sigh from Cheek. "Nathan, listen to me. I know you care about her, but you can't do anything stupid. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Chief Ibuka won't stop. He'll burn everything down to find her." Nathan clenched his jaw, a sharp edge to his voice. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't thought this through?" "You're not invincible, Nathan," Cheek shot back, the worry in his voice palpable. "I've known you long enough to know when you're about to do something reckless. You're not just protecting her, you're putting both of you at risk. I'm begging you, don't do anything dumb." Nathan's mind raced as he leaned against the kitchen counter, the weight of his friend's words settling in. He knew Cheeky cared, but this was more than just about Adaora's safety. This was personal. "I'm not doing this alone," Nathan said, his tone firm. "She's scared. I can't just sit back and let her be torn apart by this guy." Nathan felt a pang of doubt. He wanted to be the hero, to protect her. But maybe he was already too far gone to turn back. Maybe Cheeky was right. Cheek's voice broke the silence, softer this time. "Promise me you won't do anything reckless. Please. For your own sake." Nathan paused, looking at the empty space in front of him. He could feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, heavy and real. "I'll be careful, Cheeky," he said finally, his voice steady but carrying the weight of all his unresolved emotions. There was a pause, then a sigh of relief from Cheek. "Good, just don't lose yourself in this, okay?" "Yeah," Nathan muttered, and the line went quiet for a moment. "Thanks, Cheek." As he ended the call, Nathan let out a shaky breath. His mind was a blur of emotions. He wanted to be strong for Adaora, to be her protector in every sense of the word. But in that moment, it felt like the world was crashing down around him. He turned and looked at Adaora, who had been sitting quietly by the window, watching him with those unsure eyes. She looked small, fragile, a far cry from the confident woman he had first met. Nathan's heart clenched at the sight of her. Slowly he walked over to her, feeling a strange sense of urgency. When he reached her, he didn't say anything. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her, gently at first, but then tighter, as if trying to shield her from everything that was wrong in the world. Adaora tensed at the sudden embrace, her breath catching for a moment. But then she melted into him, her small figure fitting perfectly against his chest. The vulnerability in her was almost too much for Nathan to bear. His arms tightened around her, and for the first time, he felt like a hero. Not because he had some grand plan to save the world, but because in this moment, he was protecting the one person who needed him. Her arms wrapped around him hesitantly, her fingers brushing against his back, seeking comfort. Nathan rested his cheek on the top of her head, his mind racing with everything they had to face. But right now, in this small, quiet space between them, nothing else mattered. He wasn't letting go. Not now. Not ever. And for the first time, Nathan truly understood what it meant to fight for something worth fighting for. That night, the atmosphere inside Nathan's mansion was filled with the sounds of laughter and the clinking of game controllers. Nathan, Cheek, and Adaora were caught up in a lighthearted game, trying to forget the heavy cloud hanging over them. But as the sounds of joy continued, an unexpected noise pierced through, an engine slowly rolling to a stop outside. Cheek, ever the one to pick up on the slightest oddity, immediately stiffened. His hand darted to his phone, and without a word he began making rapid, hushed calls, his face darkening with concern. Nathan, noticing the shift in his friend's demeanor, looked over at Cheek. "What's going on?" Cheek looked up, his eyes narrowed. He said nothing. Before Nathan could respond, Cheek hung up and reached for his coat. "Stay here," he muttered, heading toward the door. Nathan shot him a questioning glance, but Cheeky was already out the door, disappearing into the night. Adaora, sensing the tension, stood silently by the window, peering outside, her pulse quickening as she stared at the silhouette of a black SUV parked just beyond the gates. Without a word, Nathan moved swiftly toward the security room, Adaora close behind. The surveillance footage flickered to life on the screen, showing two men stepping out of the vehicle. The leader, tall and imposing, walked toward the gates with purpose. Nathan's heart tightened in his chest as he recognized the figure. "It's him," Nathan muttered under his breath, his mind racing. It was the unmistakable figure of Chief Ibuka, though Cheek had no idea yet. Cheek's voice cut through the tense silence. "Who is that? Do you know them?" Nathan's jaw clenched. "I know exactly who it is. That's Chief Ibuka. He's come for Adaora." Cheek's eyes widened in realization. "The guy she's been running from?" Nathan nodded, his mind spinning. "Stay here, Chike." Without another word, Nathan stepped out into the cool evening air, feeling the weight of what was coming. The gates creaked open, and Chief Ibuka stepped forward, a smug expression painting his face. His men flanked him like shadows, their presence ominous. "You have something of mine," Ibuka said smoothly, his voice steady but dripping with malice. "I've come to take her." Nathan's stance remained calm, his arms crossing over his chest. "Adaora is not an object to be taken." Ibuka let out a low, mocking laugh. "She is my fiancée. She belongs to me." Nathan didn't waver. "She ran from you. That should tell you everything you need to know." Ibuka's patience was fraying, his voice dropping to a low, threatening growl. "Listen, boy, I don't know what game you're playing, but you'd better step aside before you make an enemy of me." Nathan's lips curled into a tight smirk. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing." Ibuka's eyes flashed with confusion, then quickly darkened. He hadn't expected this level of defiance. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Nathan took a deliberate step forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "I know exactly who you are, Chief Ibuka. A man who hides behind wealth and intimidation to get what he wants. But I'm not like the people you've controlled." He paused, locking eyes with Ibuka. "So let me make this clear. Adaora is staying here. And if you so much as breathe near her again, I'll have you in handcuffs before you can blink." Ibuka's fists clenched, his anger barely contained. "You think you can threaten me?" he spat. Nathan smiled coldly, unfazed. "It's not a threat. It's a promise." Ibuka's eyes hardened as his rage simmered, but deep down, he knew he had lost this round. The power he had wielded in other circles had no effect here. With a final venomous glare, he turned and walked back to his car, his men trailing behind him. The SUV rumbled to life and sped off into the night, leaving behind a heavy silence. Inside, Adaora rushed to Nathan, trembling. "He won't stop. He'll come back." Nathan wrapped her tightly in his arms, his voice calm yet resolute. "Let him try. But we both know this is far from over." The drive felt longer than usual. Nathan could feel Adaora's unease as they approached her childhood home. The place that once held so many memories of warmth and safety now felt distant and unfamiliar. The weight of what was to come hung in the air between them, a tension that neither of them could ignore. As they neared the house, Adaora's heart pounded in her chest. She'd been away for so long, and now she was returning not as the daughter who had left to start a new chapter, but as a woman who had run away from her own wedding day. The thought gnawed at her. What if they hate me? What if they blame me for everything? Nathan's steady presence beside her did little to calm her nerves. He had already done so much, helping her escape from Chief Ibuka and keeping her safe, but now she feared the judgment of the people she loved most. Her father, the one who had orchestrated the life she had tried so hard to escape, might never understand why she left. When the car stopped, Adaora hesitated for a moment, her fingers gripping the door handle. Nathan noticed her reluctance and turned toward her, offering a gentle smile. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly, his voice calm and reassuring. Adaora nodded, though the fear still clung to her. She stepped out of the car slowly, her legs unsteady as they led her up the familiar path to her parents' doorstep. The house seemed unchanged, yet everything felt different to her now. Her heart raced as Nathan followed close behind. The door opened and her mother stood there, a mixture of shock and relief in her eyes. The sight of Adaora, standing there, alive and well, was enough to bring tears to her eyes. "Adaora!" her mother whispered, rushing forward and enveloping her in a tight embrace. "Where have you been? We've been so worried." Adaora stood frozen for a moment before hugging her mother back, but the guilt inside her only grew. She had run away without saying a word, and now her family was caught in the chaos of her decisions. She didn't know how to explain it all, how to make them understand. Before she could speak, her father entered the room, his face a mixture of concern and confusion. His eyes quickly scanned the room, and when they landed on Adaora, something changed. He froze in the doorway, his face hardening, as though seeing her brought back memories of everything he had tried to control. "Adaora," her father said, his voice cold, yet laced with concern. "You've returned. But why? You've caused chaos by leaving on your wedding day." Adaora flinched, the weight of his words hitting her like a physical blow. She lowered her gaze, the shame of her actions still fresh in her mind. "I'm sorry, Papa. I didn't want to hurt you or Mama, but I couldn't marry him. I couldn't live the life you—" Her father's expression shifted, and for the first time, Adaora saw the regret in his eyes. He took a deep breath, as though struggling with the weight of his own actions. "I see now," he murmured, his voice quiet. "I was wrong. I let ambition cloud my judgment, and I forced you into a situation you never wanted." Tears welled in Adaora's eyes as she stood before him. "I'm sorry, Papa. I didn't mean to cause this much pain." Her father stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No, it is I who should apologize. I should have listened to you. I see now that your happiness was far more important than any position or wealth. I was wrong to think otherwise." Adaora blinked in surprise. For the first time, her father was acknowledging the mistake he had made. It was a humbling moment, one that made her feel a bit lighter, but she still felt the weight of the truth hanging over them. Nathan, who had stood silently by the door, watched the exchange with quiet understanding. He had known how much Adaora had suffered, both from Chief Ibuka's pursuit and the pressure of her father's expectations. Adaora took a deep breath, her heart racing as she turned to face her parents. The weight of everything she had been through was heavy on her shoulders, but this moment felt like a turning point. Her mother and father were waiting, looking at her with both concern and relief, but Adaora knew it was time to speak the truth. With a glance at Nathan beside her, she took his hand in hers and squeezed it gently, grounding herself in his presence. Then she turned back to her parents, her voice steady, but filled with gratitude. "Mama, Papa," she began, her eyes meeting theirs with sincerity. "I know you've been worried, and I'm so sorry for everything I've put you through. But I need you to know something." She paused, her breath catching as she tried to find the right words. "This man here, Nathan, he's the one who saved me. He's the one who helped me escape, who protected me when I had nowhere else to turn." Adaora looked at Nathan then, her heart full of emotion. "Without him, I don't know where I'd be. He risked everything to help me, to get me away from Chief Ibuka and bring me back to you." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her voice remained steady. "I owe him my life." Nathan squeezed her hand gently, his gaze never leaving hers. In that moment, Adaora knew, without a doubt, that she wasn't alone anymore. He stepped forward then, his voice calm but firm. "I want to thank you both," Nathan said, turning to Adaora's parents, "for raising such an incredible woman. It was my privilege to help Adaora escape the danger she was in. She's been through so much, and it's an honor to see her here, safe, and with her family." Adaora's mother nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. But there was something more that Nathan wanted to say. As he turned to Adaora, his voice softened, and he took her hand in his. "And Adaora," Nathan continued, his gaze never leaving hers, "I want you to be my wife." Adaora's heart skipped a beat. She looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise, but she saw nothing but sincerity in his expression. The weight of everything that had happened seemed to dissolve in that moment. Nathan took a step closer, his voice steady. "I know it's not the right time, and I understand the fears you have, but I want you to know that I'll be here for you, always. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Adaora, if you'll have me." Adaora's breath caught in her throat, her heart swelling with emotions she couldn't quite put into words. All the pain, all the fear, seemed to fade away in the warmth of Nathan's promise. In that moment, surrounded by the people who loved her most, she realized that despite everything, she wasn't alone. And for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. She squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening with tears. "I'll have you, Nathan. I'll have you." Her father, witnessing the exchange, smiled softly, a hint of pride in his eyes. "You have my blessing, Nathan, and you have my daughter's heart." As the family stood together in the warmth of that moment, Adaora finally felt like she was home, no longer running from the past, but embracing the future with the man who had rescued her and a family who had finally understood. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. The day of Adaora and Nathan's wedding arrived with the warm embrace of the sun spilling over the horizon. The air was alive with anticipation, and the once heavy atmosphere that had surrounded Adaora now seemed lighter, filled with the soft echoes of laughter and joy. The mansion was adorned in gold and white, the colors reflecting their new beginning, and guests filled the venue, eagerly awaiting the union of two souls who had fought so hard for their love. Adaora stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a breathtaking white gown. It was elegant, yet simple, with delicate lace and beading that shimmered under the light. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and her face was glowing, not just with the makeup applied expertly by her sister, but with the inner peace she had finally found. It had taken so long, but here she was, ready to begin the next chapter of her life, a chapter that was hers to write. Nathan stood just outside the door, waiting with nervous excitement. He had seen Adaora in many different lights over the past few months, frightened, vulnerable, strong, and brave. But today, he saw her as his equal, his partner, the woman who had captured his heart in ways he couldn't have imagined. As the doors to the ceremony hall opened, he couldn't help but breathe in the sight of her, Adaora, standing in front of him, was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. She walked towards him, each step echoing the promise they had made to each other. Their hands joined, and the ceremony unfolded around them. But all they could focus on was each other. Their vows were simple, yet profound, a reflection of all they had endured and the love that had blossomed between them. "I promise to stand by you, Adaora," Nathan said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "To protect you, to love you, and to build a future with you, no matter the challenges." Adaora smiled, her eyes glistening. "I promise to trust you, Nathan, to walk beside you through everything that comes our way. Together, we will face it all." When the officiant finally declared them husband and wife, the crowd erupted in applause. But to Nathan and Adaora, the world outside of their vows seemed distant. All that mattered was the bond they had created, a bond that no one, not even Chief Ibuka, could break. As the soft evening breeze whispered through the open window, Nathan and Adaora sat together on the edge of the bed, the moonlight bathing them in its gentle glow. The world outside felt distant, as if it no longer existed. Only the two of them in this quiet space, their hearts beating in unison. Nathan reached for Adaora's hand, his thumb gently tracing the lines of her palm, as if memorizing every detail of her being. She looked at him, her eyes filled with trust, a depth of emotion she had never allowed herself to feel before. With a slow, deliberate movement, Nathan leaned in, brushing his lips softly against hers. The kiss was tender, full of all the words they had never spoken, all the promises they had made to each other. Adaora's breath caught in her chest, and she deepened the kiss, her hands finding their way to his shoulders. Nathan pulled her closer, his touch soft but insistent, as if he couldn't bear to be apart from her for another second. His lips moved to her neck, his breath warm against her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. For the first time, Adaora felt completely safe, cherished, loved, and free to be herself. There were no expectations, no worries, only the connection between them, deep and unwavering. With every touch, every kiss, the world outside seemed to disappear. They were no longer running from anything, no longer weighed down by the past. In this moment, it was just them, two souls intertwined in a dance that had been years in the making. As Nathan's hands gently caressed her skin, Adaora closed her eyes, savoring the sensation of being truly seen, of being loved without condition. There was no fear now, only the warmth of his embrace and the quiet comfort of knowing she was exactly where she belonged. Their hearts beat faster, their connection growing more intense with each passing second. And in that moment, as they gave themselves fully to each other, Adaora knew that she was home. Not just in Nathan's arms, but in the life they would build together, full of love, trust, and the promise of a future that was theirs to create. When the night grew quiet again, they lay together, their bodies wrapped in the warmth of each other's presence. Adaora rested her head on Nathan's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey they would share forever. In that stillness, with nothing but the sound of their breathing and the soft rhythm of the waves outside, they found peace. And in each other, they found all the love they had ever dreamed of. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more heartfelt moments and incredible journeys, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We'd love to have you join the family and continue exploring these emotional, unforgettable tales together. Leave a comment and let us know what you think, and feel free to share with friends who would love this as well. Meanwhile, Cheek was at the salon, making female hair, and was simply teasing when he mentioned Adaora hiding in his friend's house. It was due to the excessive chatter in the salon, and he didn't mean for it to go any further. However, One lady overheard the conversation and passed the information to Chief Ebuka. When Chike found out, he apologized for the unintended leak. See you in the next video.